So I'm fixed now. I know.
Know what I mean? I don't mean fixed. I mean fixed.
There's so many ways that could be understood. I can think of at least two, but neither of them have happened. All right. So
Again.
If I hold my phone up to the camera, could you see the picture of the baby?
Oh, do that. Do that. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh.
Hi, beautiful.
Oh, cute.
Precious.
Oh, the cheeks.
I know, the cheeks. And everybody's healthy and feeling good?
Everybody is in good shape. I'm going to look up the statistics for you.
The statistics, the baby statistics.
Baby statistics. 19 inches long at birth, and
can you hear me now?
6
Am I on?
pounds,
Yes.
15.8 ounces.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Good size baby.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
it was really quick.
Good.
Yes. Yes, Rabbi.
Let's share. So.
Oh, we can hear you.
We could for a minute.
I wonder if it has to do with the special background. Seriously. I don't know.
It could be.
Okay, everybody.
There you go.
I can't hear anybody.
Oh,
You can
no.
hear me though, right?
Yes.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
This is a nightmare.
We see Rosemary.
And I see Francine. Like Romper Room. And I see Mary. And I see
Now you see Garby to death.
Mary. And I see Pippin.
Hey,
All right.
Joey, help me. It's been so frustrating not to be able to.
My wife just told me we're not live on.
She's so helpful.
That's
We're not
probably
live
good,
on Facebook.
considering-
She doesn't know that's the least of the problems right now. Okay. Hold it 1 second.
One thing at a time.
I just admitted myself into the class.
Now you're echoing.
I just admitted myself into the class.
And
I just want to tell you,
Oh, boy.
Now you have
it's an existential issue. I'm trying to figure out how I admitted myself. But it's actually very appropriate for this week, which is who is Jacob actually struggling with?
Ooh, nice segue.
Yeah. All right, let's share. You got the text in front of you?
Nope.
Nope.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Now we do.
You will now.
Now
It's
we
just-
do.
Connections.
It's
We're
not
having
running
technical
great.
problems here. Blazer is, so it hasn't started yet.
Okay, here we go. Yes.
Kathy gave Sarah this huge bag of, I think they're kids' toys. Yesterday. So, I said, Sarah, it probably should be washed.
All right.
So I have antibacterial steam thing on my dryer. So I'm just
Here we go.
That's a smart thing.
Jacob wrestles with the angel. Whoa. All right, Judith,
Me? All righty.
we'll have you start.
Okay. Jacob wrestles with the angel. The servants of Jacob went before him with the present for Esau, and he followed with his wives and his children. As he was about to pass over the fjord of Yavok, he observed a shepherd who likewise had sheep and camels. A stranger approached Jacob and proposed that they should ford the stream together and help each other move their cattle over. And Jacob assented on the condition that his possessions should be put across first. In the twinkling of an eye, Jacob's sheep were transferred to the other side of the stream by the shepherd. When the Then the flocks of the shepherd were to be moved by Jacob, but no matter how many he took over to the opposite bank, always there remained some on the other shore. There was no end to the cattle, though Jacob labored all the night through. At last he lost patience, and he fell upon the shepherd and caught him by the throat, crying out, "Oh, you wizard, you wizard! At night no enchantment succeeds." The angel thought, "Very well, let him know once and for all with whom he has had dealings." And with his finger he touched the earth, where fire burst forth. But Jacob said, "What, you think thus to frighten me, who am made completely of fire?" The shepherd was no less a personage than the archangel Michael, and in his combat with Jacob, he was assisted by the whole host of angels under his command. He was on the point of inflicting a dangerous wound on Jacob when God appeared. And all the angels, even Michael himself, felt their strength ooze away. Seeing that he could not prevail against Jacob, the archangel touched the hollow of his thigh and injured him. And God rebuked him, saying, "Do you act as is seemly when you cause a blemish on my priest Jacob?" Michael said in astonishment, "But why, it is I, your priest." But God said, "You are my priest in heaven, and he is my priest on earth." Thereupon, Michael summoned the archangel Raphael, saying, "My comrade, I pray you, help me out of my distress, for you are charged with the healing of all disease." And Raphael cured Jacob of the injury Michael had inflicted.
Okay, so let's pause right there. You can kind of see what happens when, at least in this one midrash, that the angels, it seems as though the angels, and again, there are, in this midrash and in this part, by this point in Jewish history, we have different angels. We have angels that have names, and we have angels that do, as you can see from this midrash, certain things. And in this one, it's Michael, who's considered one of the highest angels, who wrestles with Jacob. Now, I guess you can see there's kind of a strange thing that happens here, which is the angel definitely wants to win this wrestling match. We would assume that the wrestling match wouldn't have even taken place unless God wanted it to happen, but yet God intervenes. God ends up stopping Michael from beating Jacob in this version of the midrash. And the Bible tells us, and we'll take a look at the story in a second, the Torah tells us that Jacob gets hurt from the experience. In this version of it, it seems as that God didn't want Jacob to be injured in this fight, and so the angels rebuked for hurting Jacob. And of course, again, what did God expect when allowing this kind of thing to happen? But we get this wonderful line from God when after Michael hurts Jacob, that God says, "Look, you can't hurt my priest here on earth." We just actually read in the Torah in Leviticus that a priest cannot serve God if they have any kind of defect at all, including, unfortunately, things that they would have been born with. But God says, you can't injure or blemish my priest on earth, which is what he calls Jacob. And so God says, "Look, you're my priest in heaven, if you will, but Jacob is my priest on earth. And so there's this understanding that human beings have a role to play in this world that an angel can't play.
Oh my, it is.
And this is kind of like when we want to know what's the difference between human and angels, it's this idea that they each have a place.
We could add a little.
They each have a realm. And human beings, this is our realm. Even though angels can come into this world,
Or something.
it doesn't, this is not their place. This is the place where God wants human beings to be. And as we can see, there is an angel in charge of healing, and that is Raphael, which means literally the healing of God. So it's interesting to think, does God, if God has angels to do different things, the angel that we need right now in particular, as we fight illness, is Raphael. So let's continue, Judith.
Let's continue, Judith. Where are we? You scroll down a little bit. Mark, am I muted? No. Scroll down a little bit, Mark.
Oh, he's frozen.
It's frozen. Okay. The Lord continued to reproach Michael, saying, "Why did you do harm to my firstborn son?" And the archangel answered, "I did it only to glorify you." And then God appointed Michael as the guardian angel of Jacob and his seed to the end of all generations, with these words, "You are a fire, and so is Jacob a fire. You are the head of the angels, and he is the head of the nations."
Wow.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah? Keep going. "You are supreme over all the angels, and he is supreme over all the peoples. Therefore, he who is supreme over all the angels shall be appointed to him who is supreme over all the peoples, that he may entreat mercy for him from the supreme one over all."
Can you hear me, Judith?
Now I can, yes?
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Mute your other one. I read to supreme one over all.
Okay. Couldn't hear you. All right. So I'm going to do this in a very strange way today. I'm going to control the computer through one and then hear you through my phone. I don't know what else to do for now. I'll try to get it fixed by the end of the day. All right.
Keep reading.
All right, Judith.
Then Michael said to Jacob, "How is it possible that you, who could prevail against me, the most distinguished of the angels, are afraid of Esau?" When the day broke, Michael said to Jacob, "Let me go, for the day breaks." Jacob held him back, saying, "Are you a thief or a gambler with dice that you fear the daylight?" At that moment appeared many different hosts of angels, and they called to Michael, "Ascend, Michael." Mute one of your other things. The time of the song has come, and if you are not in heaven to lead the choir, none will sing.
So
Yeah.
pause right there. So
Yeah.
what we have there is this idea that Jacob is wrestling with Michael all day, all night, all through the night. And now, as the day comes, he needs to be back in heaven for his job. And so in order for him to get free, he's got to have Jacob let him go. was interesting about this little midrash we just read is that gamblers generally play at night, just so you know. At least in rabbinic times, they played dice and they played in the nighttime. Gamblers, I guess, didn't play during the day. So that's a little interesting insight into the society and culture of Israel at the time. And the angels have a job every morning in heaven, which is to sing. And Michael is the leader of the heavenly choir. It's one of his jobs. So, Michael, there's an interesting thing that's going on in this midrash, which is that Michael has to get to his job. He's not just fighting with Jacob, he's trying to psych him out. Or maybe again, make him step up, do what he needs to do. Because he says to him, you're not afraid of me, but you're afraid of Esau. And then the other part of this is Jacob seems to have this understanding that as long as he holds on to Michael, he's got some power here. And so the angels kind of intervene on behalf of Michael until kind of, we got to get moving. Here's what happens. Keep going.
And Michael entreated Jacob with supplications to let him go, for he feared the angels of, wait, I wrote on my screen, Aravot would consume him with fire if he were not there to start the songs of praise at the proper time. Jacob said, I will not let you go except you bless me. Whereto Michael made reply, who is greater, the servant or the son? I am the servant and you are the son. Why then crave you my blessing? Jacob urged as an argument, the angels that visited Abraham did not leave without blessing him. But Michael held, they were sent by God for that very purpose, and I was not. Yet Jacob insisted upon his demand, and Michael pleaded with him, saying, the angels that betrayed a heavenly secret were banished from their place for 138 years. Do you desire that I should acquaint you with what would cause my banishment likewise? In the end, the angel...
Well, hold it. I know you wanted to pause right there because that's a strange thing we just read, right? Which is that angels get banished from heaven. Well, this is actually not the first time that we've seen this. Angels can get banished from heaven for a long time, for generations and generations. These angels got banished for 138 years. These were the angels who went to see Abraham and during the time of Sodom and Gomorrah. And this idea that these angels were punished for what they did there is an interesting idea, and one that I mentioned before is actually in the movie Dogma that Kevin Smith did a few years back with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck as the angels. So this is an interesting idea that angels can get into trouble and have to work their way back into heaven. They have to essentially atone and make up for, and have to serve a punishment by not being in heaven. So this is something that we get in the Midrash is as again, why are there angels? Why would some angels still be around on the ground at that time? Well, it's those angels. It's those very angels that had a problem coming back with after Sodom and Gomorrah. And again, it's usually seen that what they did at Sodom and Gomorrah was help out Lot and his family in a way that they shouldn't have, not necessarily that they were too vicious, but that they were too kind. So it's an interesting tradition that we have, that angels can screw up, they can mess up, and that's a little bit again. We just revisited that theme. So let's keep going.
Do you desire, right? Do you desire that I should acquaint you with what would cause my banishment likewise? In the end, the angel nevertheless had to yield. Jacob could not be moved, and Michael took counsel with himself thus: I will reveal a secret to him, and if God demands to know why I revealed it, I will make answer. Your children stand upon their wishes with you, and you do yield to them. How then could I have left Jacob's unfulfilled? That was weird. Unfulfilled. Then Michael spoke to Jacob.
So, hold on one second. So your children stand on their wishes with you, right? And you yield to them. How could I have left Jacob's wishes unfulfilled? This is Michael's which is
Frustrating.
Hold on one second.
how could he give him a secret when giving that secret get him trapped here on earth? So
Can anyone hear Mark?
No,
No.
I told Tracy she's going to go help him.
oh, she did. She told me.
Okay.
Then Michael, can you hear me now? Then Michael.
Then Michael spoke to Jacob, saying, a day will come when God will reveal himself to you, and he will change your name. And I shall be present when he changes it. Your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For happy you of woman born, who did enter the heavenly palace and did escape thence with your life. And Michael blessed Jacob with the words, may it be the will of God that your descendants be as pious as you are.
So what did he do? He basically gives him the blessing, his new name. He tells him that he's going to have a new name. And the name basically says that this is a person who is able to
I told Tracy again.
go ahead. Keep going, Judith.
But we missed that discussion. Do you care?
I basically just said Jacob's. I'm going to go on a different computer in 1 second. And Jacob, it says Jacob gets a blessing, and the blessing will be for all of us, for you and I, all of Jacob's descendants.
Okay. At the same time, the archangel reminded Jacob that he had promised to give a tithe of his possessions to God. And at once Jacob separated 550 head of cattle from his herds, which counted 5,500. Then Michael went on, but you have sons, and of them you have not set apart the tenth. Jacob proceeded to pass his sons in review. Reuben, Joseph, Dan, Gad, being the firstborn each of his mother, were exempt, and there remained but 8 sons. And when he had named them down to Benjamin, he had to go back and begin over again with Simon the 9th and finish with Levi as the 10th. Michael took Levi with him into heaven and presented him before God, saying, O Lord of the world, this one is your lot, and the 10th belonging to you. And God stretched forth his hand and blessed Levi with the blessing that his children should be the servants of God on earth, as the angels were his servants on high. Michael spoke again. Does not a king provide for the sustenance of his servants? Whereupon God appointed for the Levites all that was holy to the Lord. Nice birds. Do you want to talk about the fact that that's the Levites? Nope. Still nope. Still nope. He's talking. And we can't hear him. Maybe we should send him some Slivovitz.
Send it to the computer.
Like libations across the keyboard or something. That might make it worse, I guess. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
Yeah,
I can hear you guys. I can hear you guys.
So
I'm
back
back.
on the computer.
So,
So
back on the phone.
back on the phone. I mean.
So let me just explain. I don't need Slivovitz. It wouldn't help at this stage. But
Why? It's 10. It's almost 10.
Yeah.
5 o'clock somewhere.
so the part that again that Judith just read is basically establishing why the Levites
are in charge. They are blessed by God and the angels to be the representatives of God here on our planet. So
that is why the
Levites have this special role to play. All right, let's keep going. Can you see the? Yeah. Good.
I have it. That's okay. Then Jacob spoke to the angel. My father conferred the blessing on me that was intended for Esau, and now I desire to know whether you will acknowledge the blessing as mine, or will bring charges against me on account of it. And the angel said, I acknowledge the blessing to be yours by right. You did not gain it by craft and cunning, and I and all the heavenly powers recognize it to be valid. For you have shown yourself master over the mighty powers of the heavens, as over Esau and his legions. And even then, Jacob would not let the angel depart. He had to reveal his name to him first, and the angel made known to him that it was Israel, the same name that Jacob would once bear. At last,
okay. So wait. So what's the name? What's the name of the angel?
Israel.
The name of the angel is the same name
as Jacob.
that Jacob's going to have, Israel. The angel's name is his name, which doesn't make him necessarily the same as the angel, but to some extent they're linked by this name. So Michael, who's the patron saint, he's the patron angel, he's the protector of Israel, is also known as Israel. That's one of Michael's names. So this is very much about knowing the name of the angels, but also through the process, Jacob gets to learn more about himself, his name. Let's keep going.
Why would the angel, what are other significances of the angel and Jacob having the same name? Besides us knowing who the angel is, did it give Jacob / Israel different strengths, or did they think? Or was it just to identify him as the protector?
Well, look, the Torah's story of Jacob holding the name of the angel, the rabbis have to deal with that. It's in the Torah. As soon as I can get the computer up and running properly, you'll see, I'll show you the Torah passage. They have to deal with that. They have to deal with the fact that there's this strange scene where he wants to know the name, he needs to know the name, and so they have to deal with that. Why doesn't he know the name? Why does he want to know the name? And so the rabbis basically have now just used this to tell us that Michael's other name is Israel, and that his connection to this angel that's essentially his angel and the angel of his descendants is going to be with him forever. Or again, they're connected by that name. So again, it's in the Torah. They didn't have a choice. They had to deal with the fact that Jacob does ask for the name.
Asks for the name of the angel or for his own name?
Name of the angel. He says to him, I'm going to show it in just a second. He needs the name. He needs to see that. He needs to know that. It's part of his control. It's part of, you could make the argument, it's part of his requirements in I don't know if controlling the angel, but being able to access the angel, that he knows the name. All right, let's continue. The last paragraph.
At last the angel departed after Jacob had blessed him, and Jacob called the place of wrestling Penuel, the same place to which before he had given the name Mahanaim. For both words have but one meaning, the place of encounter with angels.
Yeah, we don't know that that's exactly the same, that it's exactly the same place. It could be that there were two places, but at least by the rabbinic period, they're saying it's the same place. And this would be a place just on the other side of the Jordan River from Israel in modern day Syria, Jordan area. All right. Now, after the wrestling with the angel, now Jacob can confront his brother.
Okay.
Yep.
The meeting between Esau and Jacob. At the break of day, the angel left off from wrestling with Jacob. The dawn on that day was of particularly short duration. The sun rose 2 hours before his time, by way of compensation for having set early on the day on which Jacob passed Mount Moriah on his journey to Haran, to induce him to turn aside and lodge for a night on the future temple place. Well, that's nice. Indeed.
Oh, wait. So for those who weren't here about a month ago, we read about how the day shortened itself so that Jacob would have to fall asleep at Jerusalem. Well, according to this Midrash, you can't take off time without paying it off in some other way. So the day gets some extra hours this day, the other day that he confronted angels.
Gone.
Okay. Keep going.
All right. Indeed, the power of the sun on the same day was altogether remarkable. He shone with the brilliance and ardor with which he was invested during the 6 days of the creation, and as he will shine at the end of days, to make whole the halt and the blind among the Jews, and to consume the heathen. This same healing and devastating property he had on that day too, for Jacob was cured, while Esau and his princes were all but burnt up by this terrible heat. Jacob was in dire need of healing lotions for the injury he had sustained in the encounter with the angel. Combat between them had been grim. The dust whirled up by the scuffle rose to the very throne of God. Though Jacob prevailed against his huge opponent, as big as 1/3 of the whole world, throwing him to the ground and keeping him pinned down, yet the angel had injured him by clutching at the sinew of the hip, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, so that it was dislocated, and Jacob halted upon his thigh. The healing power of the sun restored him. Nevertheless, his children took it upon themselves to not eat the sinew of the hip, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, for they reproached themselves with having been the cause of his mishap. They should not have left him alone in that night.
Wow. So we know the Torah tells us we don't eat meat by the hip, by the sinew of the, by the sciatic. But here's the weird thing. It's for us punishment because we didn't come to our Father's aid while he was wrestling the angel. So that's why we don't get to eat it.
Interesting.
So it's a punishment for us.
What's the cut of meat? You wouldn't know.
Well, it's a big issue for people who love filet mignon and those kind of things.
Bird's nest up there, Karen. Bird's nest up there now.
All right. Let's keep going.
That's right.
Hold it one second.
I can't
I'm on a
see
different
what-
computer now, so now it's all going to be good. I think.
Phyllis.
Hi, Phyllis.
Hello. I just can't see what's at the bottom.
1 second, Judith. Judith, unmute yourself. All right, I'll unmute you. There we go. Wait, Judith, unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Sorry.
Now, that's okay. Although Jacob had prepared for the worst, for open hostilities even, yet when he saw Esau and his men, he thought it discreet to make separate divisions of the households of Leah, Rachel, and the handmaids, and divide the children unto each of them. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. It was the stratagem which the fox used with the lion. Do you want to talk about the fox and the lion?
Yeah. Well, do you know what that fable is?
Am
No.
I the only one who can't see the bottom of that? Oh. The bottom of that? Okay.
I'll move it. Does anybody know the fox and the lion fable? Anybody? Any Aesop fans? Hello?
No, I do not.
Rosemary? Is Rosemary there still? Hello?
She's muted.
I'm
Oh.
right. No, I'm blanking on that. Sorry.
So in the fables, as you can imagine, the fox is always the clever animal, and the lion, of course, is always the king of the beasts and the one that is supposed to be, dignified. But basically, what happens in these type of fables is that the fox basically is able to trick the lion to let him go. So in some cases, the lion's old. In some cases, here I'm going to give you
Hungry,
one of
pain.
in this case, and I mean, let's kind of focus on why why this one exists here, is that the hold it one second. Well, actually, we're gonna get their version of it, so don't worry about it. I'm gonna hold off commenting on it until now. Let's go. Yeah.
Once upon a time, the king of beasts was angry with his subjects, and they looked hither and thither for a spokesman who mastered the art of appeasing their ruler. The fox offered himself for the undertaking, saying, "I know 300 fables which will allay his fury." His offer was accepted with joy. On the way to the lion, the fox suddenly stood still, and in reply to the questions put to him, he said, "I have forgotten 100 of the 300 fables." "Never mind," said those accompanying him, 200 will serve your purpose." A little way farther on, the fox again stopped suddenly and questioned again. He confessed that he had forgotten half of the 200 remaining fables. The animals with him still consoled him that the 100 he knew would suffice. But the fox halted a third time, and then he admitted that his memory had failed him entirely, and he had forgotten all the fables he knew. And he advised that every animal approach the king on his own account and endeavor to appease his anger. At first, Jacob had had courage enough to enter the lists with Esau on behalf of all with him. Now he came to the conclusion to let each one try to do what he could for himself. I got it.
So, again, this is an example of, again, one of the cleverest of beasts losing his courage and kind of not being able to use his mind, but knowing that they better do something. They better figure out a way to to save themselves. And so, again, in this case, Jacob is compared to the fox, and so Jacob is panicking. Is essentially what's happening is he's losing his ability to use his mind because he's so scared. I mean, that's really kind of the rabbinic explanation for why Jacob is the way he is right now. So let's keep going. So again, that's what we're still assuming, because we know that Jacob seems scared when he meets his brother, that this is a real problem. All right, let's keep going.
However, Jacob was too fond a father to expose his family to the first brunt of the danger. He himself passed over before all the rest, saying, "It is better that they attack me than my children." After him came the handmaids and their children. His reason for placing them there was that if Esau should be overcome by passion for the women and try to violate them, he would thus meet the handmaids first. And in the meantime, Jacob would have the chance of preparing for more determined resistance in the defense of the honor of his wives.
Yeah, that's kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what you wanted to hear just now, but it basically says that better to have your handmaidens violated than your wife.
Your wives.
This scene of Jacob splitting his family up is in the Bible. It's a text that is important enough that the rabbis, they know they have to deal with it. Let's just take a quick look at it in the Torah so that you can see it. Well, before we get to the splitting up of the families, let's just look at the story when Jacob actually says, when he says to the angel, "You must know my name." You see it, Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name," but he said, "You must ask my name," and he took leave of him there. So in the Torah, Jacob doesn't get to hear the name yet, but in the Midrash he does. And And so there's like a line missing according to the rabbis in the Torah, because he does get to learn his name there. Again, he names the place Peniel, which we read, and then he has the limb, and it says, that's why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the socket of the hip, since Jacob's hip socket was wrenched at the thigh muscle. Now, it doesn't say that God said that they couldn't. It says that they didn't, that they chose not to do it, which again, we could kind of infer that this is because we want to honor our ancestor. It's not that God said you can't do it anymore, but that we do it as the fact that we didn't step up at that time. So the rabbis basically comment on the unusual language that's used there for us not doing something. It's more of a custom, a tradition, rather than a halakha, than a law. And again, then in chapter 33 we have, and Jacob saw Esau coming, accompanied by 400 men. He divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maids. So the two maids are mentioned directly there. And he put the maids and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. And again, it's very obvious from the Torah that he's prioritizing the people that he wants saved. I mean, the rabbis recognize that there's a reason why he does that. He thinks that if they're going to be killed, this is if this is really dangerous, these are the people that are going to die first. It's pretty clear that's why he did what he did just now. All right, let's go back to the Midrash. However,
he would, however.
Oh no. Yeah.
However, Jacob was too fond. Oh, we read that. Okay. Jacob was too fond a father to expose his family to the first brunt of the danger. He himself passed over before all the rest, saying, "It is better that they attack me than my children." After him came the handmaids and their children. His reason for placing them there was that if Esau should be overcome by passion for the women and try to violate them, he would thus meet the handmaids first. In the meantime, Jacob would have the chance of preparing for more determined resistance. In the defense and honor of his wives, Joseph and Rachel came last, and Joseph walked in front of his mother, though Jacob had ordered the reverse. But the son knew both the beauty of his mother and the lustfulness of his uncle, and therefore he tried to hide Rachel from the sight of Esau. In the vehemence of his rage against Jacob, Esau vowed that he would not slay him with bow and arrow, but would bite him dead with his mouth and suck his blood. That's cool. But he was doomed to bitter disappointment, for Jacob's neck turned as hard as ivory, and in his helpless fury, Esau could but gnash his teeth. The two brothers were like the ram and the wolf. A wolf wanted to tear a ram in pieces, and the ram defended himself with his horns, striking them deep into the flesh of the wolf. Both began to howl, the wolf because he could not secure his prey, and the ram from fear that the wolf would renew his attacks. Esau bawled because his teeth... Yes?
It's going between the two computers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Esau bawled because his teeth were hurt by the ivory-like flesh of Jacob's neck, and Jacob feared that his brother would make a second attempt to bite him. Esau addressed a question to his brother. "Tell me," he said, "what was the army I met?" For on his march against Jacob, he had had a most peculiar experience with a great host of 40,000 warriors. It consisted of various kinds of troops, armor-clad soldiers, walking on foot, mounted on horses, and seated in chariots, and they all threw themselves upon Esau when they met. He demanded to know whence they came, and the strange soldiers hardly interrupted their savage onslaught to reply that they belonged to Jacob. Only when Esau told them that Jacob was his brother did they leave off, saying, "Woe to us if our master hears that we did you harm." This was the army and the encounter Esau inquired about as soon as he met his brother. But the army was a host of angels, who had the appearance of warriors to Esau and his men. Also, the messengers sent by Jacob to Esau had been angels, for no mere human being could be induced to go forth and face the recreant. Keep going. Hello?
Hello, Mark.
Mark. Keep going. You can nod if you want me to keep going, except you're frozen. Keep going.
He's afraid of that big army of angels.
Keep going. Jacob now gave Esau the presents intended for him, 1/10 of all his cattle, and also pearls and precious stones, and besides a falcon for the chase. But even the animals refused to give up their gentle master Jacob. There we go.
Red Mark, go.
And become the property of the villain Esau. They all ran away when Jacob wanted to hand them over to his brother. And the result was that the only ones that reached Esau were the feeble and the lame, all that could not make good their escape. Keep going.
Keep going. Get
Yes.
my permission.
It's okay with me. Keep going.
Move the screen if you want me to keep going.
But keep going.
Okay.
Mark is now invisible.
At first, Esau goes back to that ghost thing. At first, Esau declined the presents offered to him. Naturally, that was a mere pretense. While refusing the gifts with words, he held his hand outstretched, ready to receive them. Jacob took the hint and insisted that he accept them, saying, "No, I pray you, if now I have found grace in your sight, then receive my presents at my hand, for as much as I have seen your face, as I have seen the face of angels, and you are pleased with me." The closing words were chosen with well-calculated purpose. Jacob wanted Esau to derive the meaning that he had intercourse with angels and to be inspired with awe. Jacob was like the man invited to a banquet by his mortal enemy who has been seeking an opportunity to slay him. When the guest divines the purpose for which he has been brought thither, he says to the host, "What a magnificent and delicious meal this is. But once before in my life did I partake of one like it. That was when I was bidden by the king to his table. Enough to drive terror to the heart of the would-be slayer. He takes good care not to harm a man on such intimate terms with the king as to be invited to his table." That's very clever. Keep going. Yes? No? I'll keep going. Jacob had valid reason for recalling his encounter with the angel, for it was the angel of Esau who had measured his strength with Jacob's and had been overcome. As Esau accepted the presents of Jacob willingly on this first occasion, so he continued to accept them for a whole year. Daily, Jacob gave him presents as on the day of their meeting, for he said, "A gift does blind the eyes of the wise, and how much more does it blind the wicked? Therefore will I give him presents upon presents. Perhaps he will let me alone." Besides, he did not attack much value in the possessions he had acquired outside of the Holy Land. Such possessions are not a blessing, and he did not hesitate to part with them. Besides the presents which Jacob gave Esau, he also paid out a large sum of money to him for the cave of Machpelah. Immediately upon his arrival in the Holy Land, he sold all he had brought with him from Haran, and a pile of gold was the proceeds of the sale. He spoke to Esau, saying, "Like me, you have a share in the cave of Machpelah. Will you take this pile of gold for your portion therein?" "What care I for the cave," returned Esau. "Gold is what I want." And for his share in Machpelah, he took the gold, realized from the sale of the possessions Jacob had accumulated outside of the Holy Land. But God filled the vacuum without delay, and Jacob was as rich as before. I was just going to ask, for those of you who can hear me, whether Esau was buried in the cave of Machpelah.
No,
But I'm guessing not, based on that he sold his share. Anyone else? Mark?
Yeah, I think that he doesn't value things that are not material. And the cave, to be buried in, it would be important, just as important as the birthright that he sold for a dish of soup.
Right. It's first of all, it's not in his lifetime. He wouldn't appreciate it himself. And it's, why spend money to be buried with your forefathers when you can, be buried for less somewhere else?
Yeah, he's a shallow man.
What's interesting, and hopefully Mark will show it to you, is in the Torah, when it talks about Esau falling on Jacob's neck, it's actually written differently. It has different, markings, different design, serifs, whatever, around the letters on his neck. So
It has a different. Exactly. It is a strange. It's a strange word as well. The simple meaning of it would be that he kissed him, but it's clearly not.
Because why would he kiss him if he really hated him still?
Yeah, and they also don't want to have him having anything good. Esau is not really capable of any decent behavior, so that's why they have him trying to bite Esau and not kiss him.
Isaac and
and again, I think Marina's point about what Esau's priorities are were spot on, because again, he doesn't care about these kind of things. He doesn't care about spiritual matters. He doesn't really care about his family. So, but it also shows us that Jacob's priorities are not material, and even more so that the stuff that he got from another country, the benefit he derived from being in Haran, he doesn't value that at all. That he would value maybe the stuff that he got from the land of Israel, but not the stuff that he got somewhere else. Again, an interesting phrase that we just read. Good people, wise people, they get freaked out and get excited by gifts. How much more so do wicked people like Esau love gifts? So again, this interesting midrash that this wasn't a one-time payment that Jacob gave Esau. This went on and on and on, that he did it every day. Again, it's kind of amazing that we have a midrash that Jacob paid Esau every day. But again, it's based on this idea that, Jacob had to come up with something to appease his brother, and the amount that he would give him would have to, almost be continuous, because Esau is such a bad person that he'd wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to kill Jacob today. So as long as he keeps giving him money, he's okay. So,
like the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll kill you today, Wesley.
Yes. But again, it's all happy though. Yes, it's all happy. It's also Scheherazade, the 1001 Nights. But there is something that's really good out of this, which is that, of course, Jacob got his money back real quick. God made sure he had money real quick. And I'm frozen again.
And you're frozen again. I do think it's interesting that for all for all Jacob's holiness or loftiness, he still continues to be rewarded with lots of sheep and lots of gold and all that. In addition, you know, he's not being given encyclopedias.
But that, yeah, yes, but he doesn't. He's not. It's not because he wants it. It's because he deserves it. As we're going to see again, wealth is not what motivates Jacob. Again, it's really funny too. This midrash that all the healthy animals ran away from Esau. They don't want to be with him either. So the only animals that stayed in his possession were the ones who couldn't get away. So that's an interesting midrash as well. And again, these are statements not just about Jacob and Esau, but about the Jewish people in the Roman world or the Gentile world. All right, let's keep going on. You'll see.
On the first occasion,
Wealth
was not an object of desire to Jacob. He would have been well content in his own behalf and in behalf of his family to resign all earthly treasures in favor of Esau and his family. He said to Esau, I foresee that in future days suffering will be inflicted by your children upon mine. But I do not demur. You may exercise your dominion and wear your crown until the time when the Messiah springs from my loins and receives the rule from you. These words spoken by
the way, that's exactly what we're talking about here, which is that Esau's descendants are the Romans and every other earthly ruler that we come into contact with. Those are Esau's descendants. But it's okay, because in the Messianic era, when my family's in charge, that's all I really care about.
These words spoken by Jacob will be realized in days to come, when all the nations will rise up against the kingdom of Edom and take away one city after another from him, one realm after another, until they reach Beit Guvrin. And then the Messiah will appear and assume his kingship. The angel of Edom will flee for refuge to Bozrah, but God will appear there and slay him. For though Bozrah is one of the cities of refuge, yet will the Lord exercise the right of the avenger therein. He will seize the angel by his hair, and Elijah will slaughter him, letting the blood spatter the garments of God. All this Jacob had in mind when he said to Esau, let my Lord, I pray you, pass over before his servant until I come unto my Lord in Seir. Jacob himself never went to Seir. What he meant was the messianic time when Israel shall go to Seir and take possession thereof.
Yeah, so let's just explain what just happened. That was a crazy apocalyptic scene. I mean apocalyptic. This is what's supposed to happen when the Messiah comes and defeats the armies of the wicked, which according to this, the armies of the wicked are led by an angel, their angel. So even our enemies have angels to protect them and to lead them. This is very much in Christian mythology, if you will, too. So Bozrah is a place in modern day Jordan, across the Jordan River from Israel, south of the Dead Sea, and it is in Christian interpretations too, a place where there's one of the kind of apocalyptic final battles. In this, you read that it's a place where the angel of Edom is defeated, and the angel is essentially slaughtered by us, by our people, including Elijah, the prophet who announces the end times. So this strange midrash that got included in here is one that tells us that, well, it was added because it tells us something about how we envisioned the final battle to happen. It's interesting because according to this, there are battles before the final battle. So so we start winning battles. The Jews start winning battles, and once we take Beit Guvrin, the Messiah will come and start leading the armies, which means that like people would have to start fighting before they got the Messiah. Which is an interesting idea. It's not like the Messiah, at least in this tradition, it's not like the Messiah comes down and then leads us into battle, but that we actually have to do some of the fighting ourselves, and then the Messiah will come. So you can understand if Jewish people believe this and followed this kind of tradition, you can understand why sometimes they'd start fighting with the Romans, thinking that if they started winning some battles, then the Messiah would come. It's not that the Messiah leads them in the first battle and from then on they're doing stuff. It's that they have to do a little bit of it themselves, and then once they start the fight, then the Messiah will come and join them. So this is a really interesting idea, which is one where you could say maybe the original leaders of the revolt are not the Messiah themselves, but are kind of like the precursors to the Messiah. They're the ones who start it, and then they have to start it, but once they start it, they're going to put it into motion. So you can understand why people might have fought with the Romans, not necessarily thinking that they were the Messiah, but that the Messiah was going to come soon. That's what you just read. That's what we just read. Let's keep going.
Jacob tarried in Sukkot a whole year, and he opened a house of learning there. Then he journeyed to Shechem, while Esau betook himself to Seir, saying to himself, "How long shall I be a burden to my brother?" For it was during Jacob's sojourn at Sukkot that Esau received daily presents from Jacob. And Jacob, after abiding these many years in a strange land, came to Shechem in peace, unimpaired in mind and body. He had forgotten none of the knowledge he'd acquired before. The gifts he gave to Esau did not encroach upon his wealth. The injury inflicted by the angel that wrestled with him had been healed, and likewise his children were sound and healthy. It's a nice life.
So he comes, so when he gets to Shechem, that's when everything, he starts to he's back to normal, if you will. He's healthy again, and takes a while. Doesn't happen overnight, but it takes a while, and his body, his mind, his family are all good. This is what happens in Shechem. And again, this is part of what happens in the Torah, which is that we find Jacob in the city of Shechem. Okay.
Jacob entered Shechem on a Friday late in the afternoon, and his first concern was to lay out the boundaries of the city, that the laws of the Sabbath might not be transgressed. As soon as he was settled in the place, he sent presents to the notables. A man must be grateful to a city from which he derives benefits. No less did the common people enjoy his bounty. For them, he opened a market where he sold all wares at low prices.
There you go. There's the first Jewish merchant. There he is. How do you ingratiate yourself? You open up the Jew store in town. And that's what they used to call it. I mean, I'm not joking. It was called the Jew store. My family, many of your families had a Jew store. And sometimes they'd go to places where there were no other markets or no other stores. And they'd open up a store, and before you knew it, it was Macy's.
Have you noticed that the nobles get their stuff for free, but the poor have to pay?
It's like the gift basket at the Oscars, right?
It says that he gave people gifts, right? That he gave people gifts. You got to pay off the people in charge. But how does he help the common man? By having a store with really low prices.
Discounts.
By the way, I mean, if you think that we've stopped this, I mean, we still haven't. There are still enough people around, and there's still enough. We haven't evolved yet to the point where we've let go of that trope if you will, that Jews have stores where they, have really good prices. So I don't know. This was written 2,000 years ago, so it seems like it was part of the story back then. All right, Larry Miller, sit and sleep. Anyways, let's keep going.
Also, he lost no time in buying a parcel of ground, for it is the duty of every man of substance who comes to the Holy Land from outside to make himself the possessor of land there. He gave 100.
Pause right there, because you just read something that's also very relevant today, which is that there are people who buy land and property in Israel because they believe that it's a job of every Jewish person to own land in Israel. Now, again, you can't own land because Israel, you can only get a lease, a 99-year lease, but you understand the point. You buy property in Israel. The problem is that this has created a artificial real estate market in Israel that's very, very, very difficult for citizens of Israel to participate in. And we have entire areas of Jerusalem in particular that are vacant, 10 months out of the year, because wealthy Jews from America and Europe, from France, Australia, South Africa, they buy places there. And I will tell you, they do it because it's considered to be a mitzvah to do it. But you can imagine real estate and the market being a supply demand like every other market. There's only so much land, there's only so much space. And so if essentially it's being artificially increased by people trying to fulfill this mitzvah of owning land there. I'm going to tell you, my dad and I, we thought about this 16 years ago, when Israel was still dealing with the Intifada. We saw these beautiful condos in Jerusalem right near the David Citadel Hotel, and they were selling for about 400, 500, 600,000 at the time. As soon as the Intifada stopped, those condos were selling for 2 million minimum. I don't even know what they're at now. I would be afraid to see what they were like, but within 3 or 4 years, they were $2 million. Because again, to be able to own land in Israel is such a mitzvah, it's such a premium that it's crazy. It's a crazy market. So this is very relevant to this day, that people can't buy land and can't buy property in Israel because so many people have second homes in the land of Israel, and it's based on a nice idea, which is people want to have a piece of Israel, but it's not fair for the people who are living there on a daily basis. So I don't really know what the answer is there, folks. Timeshares obviously are a possibility,
and each community should buy one. Like Temple Beth Ami should have a condo in Jerusalem.
Yep.
Where we all could stay when we visit.
Yes. Exactly.
But you'd be able to say you have a piece of Israel. And again, it's tough because how often do we go there? But it is really, I will tell you, it is a dream of mine one day to own something in Israel. But again, I wonder sometimes whether I'm going to be part of the problem. I have a cousin who lives in Israel right now. She can't afford to live. She lives in Jerusalem. She can't afford to live anywhere near the center of Jerusalem because it's so cost prohibitive. I feel bad. I don't want to be part of the problem, but it is kind of, again, something. If I had a lot of money, if I won the lottery, I would definitely buy a place in Israel, and probably, again, unfortunately, not use it as much as I should.
But you would let the rest of us use it.
Jacob lives there. Yes, I'd let you all stay there. But Jacob actually lives here. So for him, this is an interesting issue because our ancestors feel that he should own the land or a piece of the land. But of course, as we know, he's still not really settled yet. So here they say he actually did buy part of the land in Shechem. Okay, here's what it says.
We're going to start Shechem today?
Yeah.
Okay. The outrage at Shechem.
You didn't finish it, did you?
No, you didn't finish it yet.
Also,
Sorry, you're at. He gave 100 lambs.
Ah, he
Sorry.
gave 100 lambs. He gave 100 lambs for his estate, 100 yearling sheep, and 100 pieces of money, and received in return a bill of sale to which he attached his signature using the letters Yud, Hey for it. And then he erected an altar to God upon his land, and he said, "You are the Lord of all celestial things, and I am the Lord of all earthly things." But God said, "Not even the overseer of the synagogue aggregates privileges in the synagogue, and you assumed lordship with a high hand? Forsooth, on the morrow, your daughter will go abroad, and she shall be humbled."
Now that's crazy, because now you have a midrash that sets up why Jacob's daughter Dinah has to go through what she's about to go through, which is that Jacob behaves presumptuously with his settling in Shechem. Again, there's no reason given for what we're about to read, which is what we sometimes call the rape of Dinah. But the rabbis want to try to understand it, and we're going to have a couple of midrashim about what causes this. Why does this happen? I just want to show one other thing as we read this part. I want to show you in the Torah where this exists, how the story is given in the Torah. So at the end of chapter 33, it says he set up an altar there and called it El Elohei Yisrael in Shechem. So it does say that this is another place where Jacob established an altar. By the way, Shechem is in today's modern day city of Nablus, which is completely a Palestinian area with a few Jewish areas that are, places where people have established some Jewish towns there in that area, but it is the heartland of the West Bank. It's heartland of where Palestinians live, and there is a tomb there in Shechem, which is the tomb of Joseph, which is traditionally where we believe Joseph's buried. And Jews are allowed to visit that tomb, but it's been vandalized and burned a few times, and it's a tough place to go to see. But interestingly, Shechem / Nablus is an interesting area for Israel today. So here's what the Torah says in chapter 34. Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, saw her and took her and lay with her by force. Being strongly drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and in love with the maiden, he spoke to the maiden tenderly.
After the fact.
So Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as wife." Let's leave off there and get back to the midrash. That's the setup of the story, and now we're going to read the midrash.
The outrage at Shechem. Shechem or Shechem?
Either one.
All right. While Jacob and his sons were sitting in the house of learning, occupied with the study of the Torah, Dinah went abroad to see the dancing and singing women, whom Shechem, that sound right, had hired to dance and play in the streets in order to entice her forth. Had she remained at home, nothing would have happened to her, but she was a woman, and all women like to show themselves in the street. When Shechem caught sight of her, he seized her by main force, young though she was, and violated her in a beastly fashion.
Yes, so at least according to this midrash, this is non-consensual. Again, Shechem is the name of the guy, and it's the name of the city. The city is named after him, assumedly, or one of his ancestors. His father Hamor is the king, and some people say they named the city after him. Shechem literally means shoulder. It is going to eventually be in the tribe of Ephraim when the Israelites resettled the land during the time of Joshua. And it is based on what we know from archaeology. It was a city that been inhabited for a long time. It is interesting that this city will factor into later Jewish history as well, and it's even mentioned in the Christian Bible too. But it's set as the scene for this for what we call the outrage of Shechem, the rape of Dinah. But the fact that the rabbis have a big problem with it, much more so than maybe the Torah did originally, where the Torah is, we recognize that Shechem has feelings for Dinah. That really doesn't matter at all to the rabbis. It doesn't factor into what happens. So before we get into that, we're going to have some Midrash that still explains how did this happen in the first place? Why would this happen in the first place? Here's another Midrash.
This misfortune, really? Okay. This misfortune befell Jacob as a punishment for his excessive self-confidence. In his negotiations with Laban, he had used the expression, "My righteousness shall answer for me hereafter."
Yeah, which is, again, seems to be a strange place to lay it on, which is that Jacob seems very full of himself in that encounter. Well, you read one other reason, which is because he felt very full of himself when he made a pact with the people of Shechem. So you've heard two answers for why he deserved to have this happen to him, by the way. Again, not to his daughter, but to him. That's not all. There's another reason here.
Besides, on his return to Palestine, when he was preparing to meet his brother, he concealed his daughter Dinah in a chest, lest Esau desire to have her for wife, and he be obliged to give her to him. God spoke to him, saying, "Herein have you acted unkindly toward your brother, and therefore Dinah will have to marry Job, one that is neither circumcised nor proselyte. You did refuse to give her to one that is circumcised, and one that is uncircumcised will take her. You did refuse to give her to Esau in lawful wedlock, and now she will fall a victim to the ravisher's illicit passion."
Yeah. So this is a very famous Midrash, one that some of you may have heard before, which is Dinah's rape is punishment for the fact that she was supposed to be given to Esau as a wife. Now, after all we've read in the Midrash about Esau, you'd be saying, why would he have done that? Well, the issue is that Esau, for all of his horrible behavior and for all that was wrong with Esau, is number one, family, and number two, that means he's also, because he's a descendant of Abraham and Isaac, he's circumcised. Now, again, we wouldn't say Esau is Jewish or Israelite, but he is close. He's as close as you can get. And in the rabbi's mind, and the ones who wrote this Midrash, that's better than the alternative. And the alternative is now going to be Shechem, and as we see also a possibility later on, Job. Now, this idea that Job and Dinah are married is, I mean, I don't even know what you could say about it other than the fact that the rabbis want to know who Job was married to. They like Job in the sense that he seems like he's got a lot of righteous qualities. And so maybe Dinah could be married to him. It wouldn't be so bad. But the idea that after this incident with Shechem, that she's married off to Job is an interesting Midrash because it explains who Job would be married to. It explains who Dinah could be married to later on. And it makes a bad story maybe not as bad, but it's still not great. And it's just, again, it's showing this idea that that Jacob has to pay a price, and the price for his the price is Dinah. The price is Dinah's honor. So this is a strange stream that we have in the Midrash, which is that Jacob screwed up, and that's why this happens to him. Rather than, again, that it's just a tragedy that this happened, it's somehow punishment. It's punishment for Jacob. Because otherwise, how does this happen to Jacob? Jacob is fulfilling his destiny of living in the promised land. And almost immediately, the first story we have after he comes back is that his daughter gets raped. So it doesn't seem like God's rewarding him for it. And in the rabbi's mind, there must be a reason for it. This has to be connected to something. And what they're doing is trying to find ways for Jacob to have had this tragedy be visited on him. It can't be simply that life, doesn't always work out, even for those who do good things. And the idea that Dinah, the innocent victim in this, is being punished for her dad's misdeeds is something that they don't have an issue with. I mean, we may have an issue with it, but they didn't. But the one thing that they'll say about Dinah was that, like all women, what does she want to do? She wants to walk on the wild side. And so walking on the wild side is not something that you should do even for a day, even for a moment.
Who is Job, and where does he come from?
We don't know. So Job, in the beginning of the book, it says he's from the land of Uz, which we assume, based on other references in other places, that the land of Uz is the modern day Jordan, Saudi Arabia. It's on that side of the other side of the Jordan River. But this idea that Job was married to Dinah is one that the rabbis are trying to find out what happened. They want to know what happens to her. They don't want her to disappear.
But is she his first wife or his second wife?
That's what I was going to ask.
It seems as though it's his second wife, the one that he has the new set of kids with. The reward that he gets for being righteous. And so Dinah gets to marry somebody. And again, we don't know exactly when Job lives either. So the fact that Job is a contemporary with Abraham, one possibility. The fact that Job is a contemporary of Moses is also a possibility, because in the Midrash, Job also is maybe one of the Egyptian courtiers of Pharaoh who gets out of town once he sees that God is punishing Pharaoh. All of these are possibilities. But what happens to Dinah is one of the things the rabbis are concerned about, because she's not one of the sons, but she is pretty important. She's one of Jacob's kids, and she's important. She's named. She's important. We need to know her story. And so again, we have another story. We're going to get to some of the other midrash about her too today.
Wait, before we go on,
yeah,
I understand why Jacob wanted to hide his daughter from the brother. I mean, the animals were afraid of him, according to this.
Yeah.
So he's a beast.
So here's the strange thing. So Marina, you're touching on an important point. Why would the rabbis have her? Why would they want her to be with Esau? Now here's an interesting idea, which is one that seems to exist here, and it exists in other places in the rabbinic, in the Midrash. It's an operating principle, which is that maybe if things had gone differently, the things that happened didn't have to happen. So if you can roll back the timeline, somehow if Dinah and Esau would have been able to have a family together, that Esau's family wouldn't have been as bad, that Dinah could have redeemed Esau, that the children that they would have had together would not have been the enemies of our people, that Esau's descendants would have wound up being better than they were, which is essentially, again, Esau's descendants are our enemies. They're our nemesis, but even more so, nemesis has got a role to play. There's also this sense that Esau's descendants, including Amalek, because the Amalekites are descendants of Esau. These descendants are there to perpetually be our enemy, perpetually be our destroyer. So maybe if Dinah had had children with him, those children would have been either Jewish, part of our people. It wouldn't have been as bad if Dinah had been there to help us, or just Dinah's descendants with him. I know it's not exactly what we want to hear, because the idea of Dinah being married to this brute is troublesome, but it is possible that, again, in the rabbi's mind, that she could have helped him, she could have redeemed him, she could have fixed him, and Jacob took away that possibility, deprived Edom, Esau, of that possibility. And the consequences are not one woman. The consequences are generations and generations, thousands of years of Jewish persecution, because Edom, nobody ever fixed them.
Why is Job the only choice for her if she doesn't?
He's not. It's only one version of it. So Job ends up being one possibility. There's another possibility that she is married to Red Tent fans. Come on.
Oh, an Egyptian. Doesn't she become a midwife or something, right? In Red Tent? No, stonemason.
She does, but that's even more. That's based more on the fact that when she goes down to Egypt, well, we'll get to it. I was gonna.
So she would be either Shifra or Pua.
Maybe, but more importantly, before that, she's the wife of Potipharah, the mother of Osnat. So how does Joseph have a wife? How could Joseph possibly marry somebody
who wasn't part of the family? That's how.
Part of the family.
I remember that.
He has a role to play in being able to provide a proper spouse, who would have been, again, a cousin. If Dinah has a daughter with an Egyptian, Potipharah, that child is Joseph's cousin and is a perfect, suitable match for him. Anyways, Joseph would have been a young guy at this point, so if they had a kid, that child would have been a possible, could have been possibly.
Because she's older than he is.
All right. We'll get to some of those.
When Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter, he sent 12 servants to fetch Dinah from Shechem's house. But Shechem went out to them with his men and drove them from his house, and he would not suffer them to come to Dinah, and he kissed and embraced her before their eyes. Jacob then sent 2 maidens of his servants' daughters to remain with Dinah in the house of Shechem. Shechem bade 3 of his friends go to his father Hamor, the son of Hadakum, the son of Pered, and say, "Get me this damsel to wife." Hamor tried first to persuade his son not to take a Hebrew woman to wife, but when Shechem persisted in his request, he did according to the word of his son and went forth to communicate with Jacob concerning the matter. In the meanwhile, the sons of Jacob returned from the field, and kindled with wrath, they spoke to their father, saying, "Surely death is due to this man and his household, because the Lord God of the whole earth commanded Noah and his children that man shall never rob nor commit adultery." Interesting that they're in the same verse. "Now behold, Shechem has ravaged and committed fornication with our sister, and not one of all the people of the city spoke a word to him." And while they were speaking, Hamor came to speak to Jacob the words of his son concerning Dinah, and after he ceased to speak, Shechem himself came to Jacob and repeated the request made by his father. Simon and Levi answered Hamor and Shechem deceitfully, saying, "All you have spoken to us, we will do. And behold, our sister is in your house, but keep away from her until we send to our father Isaac concerning this matter, for we can do nothing without his counsel." He knows the ways of our father Abraham, and whatever he says to us, we will tell you, and we will conceal nothing from you.
Let's read another paragraph and then we'll explain.
Roll it up. Shechem and his father went home thereafter, satisfied with the result achieved. And when they had gone, the sons of Jacob asked him to speak counsel and pretext in order to kill all the inhabitants of the city who had deserved this punishment on account of their wickedness. Then Simon said to them, I have good counsel to give you. Bid them be circumcised. If they consent not, we shall take our daughter from them and go away. And if they consent to do this, then when they are in pain, we shall attack them and slay them. The next morning, Shechem and his father came again to Jacob to speak concerning Dinah. And the sons of Jacob spoke deceitfully to them, saying, We told our father Isaac all your words, and your words pleased him. But he said that thus did Abraham his father command him from God, that any man that is not of his descendants, who desires to take one of his daughters to wife, shall cause every male belonging to him to be circumcised.
Okay. So this is in the Torah, right? So the story of what happens, let's just take a gander back at the, let's back at the other computer. It says, the men were very distressed and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing not to be done. And Hamor spoke with them, saying, My son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give him in marriage. Intermarry with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You will dwell amongst us, and the land will be open before you. Settle, move about, and acquire holdings in it. Then Shechem said to her father and brothers, Do me this favor, and I will pay whatever you will tell me. Right? So it says here in the Torah, Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor, speaking with guile, because he had defiled their sister Dinah, and said to them, We cannot do this thing to give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised, for that is disgrace among us. Only upon this condition will we agree with you, that you will become like us, and that every male among you is circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you and take your daughters ourselves, and we will dwell amongst you. But if you will not listen to us, we will take our daughter and go. So it says that this was what they did, that they asked them to be circumcised. It doesn't say that Jacob told them this, but that was the brothers. It was the brothers who had decided on this plan, this great plan. According to the Midrash, this was also a way for them to, we know right away, for them to exact vengeance. There's not a question in the Midrash why this is going to be done. And their point in this is that the people of Shechem have violated two of the Noahide laws. They've stolen and they've committed adultery. They've committed sexual crimes. Remember, Gentiles are responsible for certain laws. There are 7 Noahide laws. And what they just said is these people just broke 2 of the Noahide laws. These are not people that we should be associating with. On the contrary, these are horrible people that we've got to punish. So this is what happens in this scene, is that the people of the city have proven that they deserve to be attacked because of the way that their society is being run. And so it's not just the family, it's not just Hamor and Shechem and his family, but it's the whole city. It's this whole community. And again, this allows the brothers to exact vengeance, and particularly Simon and Levi, who the story tells us are the ones who are the main protagonists in this vengeance. Let's read a little bit more, and we'll get to the exciting climax, if you will, of this story, which combines sex, violence,
Just no
vengeance.
drugs.
It's not
No,
good.
no drugs.
No rock
Not
and roll.
Yeah.
Shechem and his father hastened to do the wishes of the sons of Jacob, and they persuaded also the men of the city to do likewise, for they were greatly esteemed by them, being the princes of the land. On the next day, Shechem and his father rose up early in the morning, and they assembled all the men of the city, and they called for the sons of Jacob, and they circumcised Shechem, his father, his 5 brothers, and all the males in the city, 645 men and 276 lads. Hadakum, the grandfather of Shechem, and his 6 brothers would not be circumcised, and they were greatly incensed against the people of the city for submitting to the wishes of the sons of Jacob.
So here's a wonderful midrash that we have, that not everybody in Shechem went along with this idea. There were some hardcore traditional Shechemites who said, "This, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do it." So it's according to the midrash, it's Shechem's grandfather. It's Hamor's father that says, "I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to participate in this barbaric, and we're going to behave like the Hebrews. We're going to become Hebrew." So that's an interesting little midrashic insight too. Again, nothing in the Torah that tells us anybody opted out. Okay, here's what it says.
In the evening of the second day, Shechem and his father sent to have 8 little children, whom their mothers had concealed, brought to them to be circumcised. Hadakum and his 6 brothers sprang at the messengers and sought to slay them, and sought to slay also Shechem, Hamor, and Dinah. They chided Shechem and his father for doing a thing that their fathers had never done, which would raise the ire of the inhabitants of the land of Canaan against them, as well as the ire of all the children of Ham, and that on account of a Hebrew woman. Hadakum and his brothers finished by saying, "Behold, tomorrow we will go and assemble our Canaanite-ish brethren, and we will come and smite you, and all in whom you trust, and there shall not be a remnant left of you or them." When Hamor and his son Shechem and all the people of the city heard this, they were sore afraid, and they repented what they had done. And Shechem and his father answered Hadakum and his brothers, "Because we saw that the Hebrews would not accede to our wishes concerning their daughter, we did this thing. But when we shall have obtained our request from them, we will then do unto them that which is in your hearts and in ours, as soon as we shall become strong."
So here's an interesting midrash, which is that the Shechemites decide that they're going to go along with this, but they're only going to do it to pretend. In their hearts, they're going to eventually turn on the Israelites. They're going to turn on Jacob and his family. So they're not. There's no real feeling in here that they're not going to eventually turn on Jacob as well, which is strange because, again, don't have that in the Torah. It doesn't seem to be part of the story, other than, again, wanting us to tell us that in their hearts, these people are no different than they were in the first place. So let's finish up.
What a sacrifice to make.
Yeah, it seems kind of strange that they go through this. But according to this, some of them they'd already gone through it. So we're going to wait for everybody to go through this. Okay, here we go.
Dinah, who heard their words, hastened and dispatched one of her maidens, whom her father had sent to take care of her in Shechem's house, and informed Jacob and his sons of the conspiracy plotted against them. When the sons of Jacob heard this, they were filled with wrath. And Shimon and Levi swore and said, "As the Lord lives, by tomorrow there shall not be a remnant left in the whole city." They began the extermination by killing 18 of the 20 young men who had concealed themselves and were not circumcised. And 2 of them fled and escaped to some lime pits that were in the city. Then Shimon and Levi slew all the city, not leaving a male over. And while they were looking for spoils outside of the city, 300 women rose against them and threw stones and dust on them. But Shimon single-handedly slew them all and returned to the city, where he joined Levi. Then they took away from the people outside of the city their sheep, their oxen, their cattle, and also their women and the little children. And they led all these away and took them to the city to their father Jacob. The number of women whom they did not slay, but only took captive, were 85 virgins. Among them, a young damsel of great beauty by the name of Bunah, which Shimon took to wife. The number of the males which they took captive and did not slay was 47. And all these men and women were servants to the sons of Jacob and to their children after them until the day they left Egypt.
Whoa. Okay. So we actually had slaves in Egypt, according to this Midrash, but that's the least strange part of this. The bigger issue, of course, is that we have a Midrash that the vengeance that we took on the city of Shechem was to save ourselves, because eventually these people were planning on turning on us anyways. So the battle that we have, or the not battle, but the massacre that Shimon and Levi perpetrate, is one that is preemptive. That otherwise they were going to do it to us. So again, the rabbis have come up with a very interesting and kind of clever way of saying it wasn't a massacre. It was preemptive, and it was a way for us to stop our own death. Look, the Torah seems to be very clear that Shimon and Levi did not do the right thing. The fact that the rabbis have a midrash that gets them off the hook seems to go against the intent of the Torah itself, which is that Shimon and Levi they have a temper, and they are working maybe outside the law, if you will. This is an act of vengeance that is unnecessary and is not something to be commended. But again, in the Midrash, they're essentially they're let off the hook a little bit, and they're not this was necessary to some extent. So the story does not have a happy ending, no matter what. Not in the Torah or the Midrash do we have a happy ending. It is strange, though, that the rabbis use this as an opportunity to explain where this woman Bunah comes from, who's Shimon's wife, according to the story, and the fact that we wound up with slaves because of this, perpetual generations who are in servitude to us. And, this is, we don't learn, I mean, the name Bunah, we don't have her in the Torah. So it's not like they had to have a wife for Shimon. But there is this idea that somehow there were slaves we had servants. And where did these servants come from? They came from Shechem. That their family becomes servants to us. War prize or tribute in war we took. So again, the Midrash uses this opportunity to explain how certain things happened. Next week we're going to see, the consequences of this. The fact that Jacob doesn't like what they did. The Torah is very specific that Jacob is concerned, maybe not so much with the fact that they were ultra violent, but what will the consequences be of that violence? Now the rest of the Canaanites will turn on them because of what they did. So Jacob's issue seems to be less with their violence and their deception, but more with the consequences. What are we going to be left with after this? Did you think about the consequences of this? So we will see that next week. Again, I apologize for the many technical problems. We must fix this by tonight, because at 6 o'clock tonight, of course, we have our Shavuot cooking class, and I promise you we will rectify this so that my wife we're going to do a full technical overhaul so that by tonight we're ready to go, and you can all enjoy the Shavuot class. We'll resend out the invite again for everybody. Well, actually, we just did. We sent it out just few minutes ago. We sent out that invite, but
When is Yisker?
so it's an interesting question. When is Yisker? So we have a tradition, as some people might know, that we say Yisker at all the Hagim, all the festivals. So if you follow that Shavuot is a 2-day holiday, which is the way conservative and Orthodox Judaism have, then it is it would be Saturday night. So if you're following that, you're following Shavuot for one night, for one day, it would be Friday night. So it would start Friday night. So Shavuot is Thursday night. Oh, excuse me. No, it would be Thursday night. So Thursday night is Erev Shavuot. So what day is that? More importantly,
Thursday night. Friday would be Yisker.
Yeah, Thursday night is the night of the 28th. So Friday night would be Yiskor if you're following 2 days. So Friday night into Saturday is the second day of Shavuot, and the first day of Shavuot is the Thursday through Friday. I keep forgetting, this is such a weird week because this very rarely happens. Well, first of all, you have to have Memorial Day has to be the 25th, which it hardly ever is. This is the earliest Memorial Day can be, the 25th. It can't be any earlier than the 25th. The other thing is you have to have a year like this where you have Shavuot that falls in the month of May. So literally this week, folks, ends with Shavuot, and it ends over the weekend. So no matter what, the interesting thing about Shavuot this year is that it overlaps with Shabbat. And so people who have the tradition of not cooking over Shavuot have to start and continue their cooking from the day before.
But you can't you? Because it's festival. It's not Shabbat, or
Yeah, but the issue is Shabbat is the first day. The first day you're coming out of Shabbat. Anybody who's following that for the second day, it's still Shabbat. So it's an unusual occurrence. It doesn't actually, it's more of an unusual. Shavuot can easily be Thursday, but it's unusual that it's the same week as Memorial Day. Basically, I'm only telling you this because tonight we have Shavuot cooking class at 6. We have Torah study at 7 on Wednesday, and then we have our Shavuot study session we have the Shavuot study session on Thursday night, and then we have Shabbat services on Friday. So we have a really, really busy week. I don't know how to tell you this other than it's a very, very busy time. We also do want to remind people that we're going to be streaming the adult B'nai Mitzvah class, the service that they're going to be doing, which is the following week. That's going to be June 6th. We always do our adult B'nai Mitzvah pretty close to Shavuot. We have a couple people like Judith and Rosemary and Francine who've done this in previous years. And we have with us one of our celebrants this year. I say celebrants is Marina. So she'll be celebrating and reading from the Torah. So
wow.
Shavuot is always a time for celebrating getting the Torah. And I promise you this year, we're going to be talking on Thursday night. The part that I'll be sharing will have to do with how the Torah, and especially this Torah portion for Shavuot, what does it teach us about dealing with our current situation? So they'll be reading from Parshat Naso, which we've had in the past. We've had B'nai Mitzvah read from Naso. Once again, that's our Torah portion for our B'nai Mitzvah class. And again, everybody please take some time this week to get ready for Shavuot. Join us tonight. Join us Thursday night for the study session, and of course Wednesday night for Torah study.
Is that 6:30 Thursday night for this study session?
Study session is Thursday at 6:30. Yeah, I tried to share it, but it won't let me. It won't let me on this computer. It won't let me share. It won't let me share my.
And will they be sending out the link, or how is that going to work? Do we have it already? I haven't looked.
It was in the yes. It is. It was sent.
It was
out
in the e-blast, Judith.
It's in the e-blast, and it is.
I promise you, it is everywhere where commercials for Temple Beth ME can be found. I'm going to actually show it right now.
So you won't be doing a Yiska service. We'll have to.
Well, yeah. The issue for us, Phyllis, is that there's a question of how we would do it. There's also a question of whether it is whether it's permissible for us to do it live online. But I think a bigger issue for us, Phyllis, is one of the things that we really want to do is make sure you have a Yisker candle. And so we're gonna place some Yisker candles out in front of the synagogue for people to get starting Wednesday night, or Wednesday. You can pick them up. So Wednesday evening. Let me say this again very carefully. So they'll be available Wednesday evening through Shavuot. You can come by and pick up a candle for Yiskor in front of the sanctuary, in front of the synagogue. So you don't have to get in through the gate. It'll be out in front of the gate. Don't worry about your code. And if anybody doesn't want to go to the synagogue for whatever reason, let me know. Text me and I'll have one here at the house for you. So again, I apologize for all the technical difficulties today. You don't know how hard I fought to make sure that I could do it, but it was almost impossible, but we did it. I didn't give up. All right, everybody, take care. And congratulations again to Rosemary.
Yay, baby.
Bravo. Hey.
Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, Rosemary.
How much did she weigh?
She weighed, hang on a minute. The right text here. Oh, she sent it to David. Yes, here we are. 6 pounds, 15.8 ounces.
Good job.
All right, everybody, take care.